Thanks for the interaction in the beginning. I'm with the Vale Green Energy Vehicle Program, and that's really, a focus in and around battery vehicles right now. So this is very hot topic inside of our business as well. Next slide, please. So this project is around operational knowledge sharing around electric vehicles and for the electric mine. And really this is around creating a neutral platform to try and support one another throughout this trialing phase that we're seem to all really be in, and to try and capture performance data, sort of vehicle related data, but also more of the qualitative and the anecdotal feedback from the operations as well. It's all very important in trying to validate this technology to help each of our businesses try and move down this path as soon as possible. And so that's what this sort of operational knowledge sharing platform is all really about. There's a lot of challenges, and hence the need for the various standards of electric vehicles in mining. And that's we're trying our best to provide the solutions to industry as we know them. But really, if we can try and share our learnings as we've collected them on a somewhat sort of live basis and a routine basis, we can each benefit from each other's investment in this space and try and mutually as one core group not only advance this technology in terms of its maturity level, but also help support the technology in terms of OEM development and making it more commonly available for us to invest in. Next slide, please. So from an operational sharing standpoint, we wanted to have a common platform to be able to ensure that data and metrics and feedback is collected from trials of these new vehicles in a common way. So the same way that, Chevrolet and Ford calculate their 0 to 100, speed records, we want to do the same thing with respect to collecting our data. So it's known that every metric, every data point is collected in the same way, and that it's been validated through the GMG. So a number of key real kind of themes or buckets. So the first one, around performance, of course. How are the vehicles performing in terms of operational performance? So speed, cycle time, and then also moving into other items such as availability, utilization, etc. Some of this, which is a hard nut to crack, and we haven't done the best of it in the diesel world either. But all these different metrics are going to really feed into the financial models that each of our organizations needs to build to really make this investment long term. Another bucket around battery management. So what's the operational efficiencies and impact of charging? Charge time versus swap time, for example. How often are we having to charge these vehicles? What's the impact on availability because of charging, for example? So there's so many different metrics that we're trying to track. Next slide, please. Just to show a few more of the buckets, we got, maintenance. We have sort of operations and sort of metrics that tailor to the operator themselves, and then certainly the business case. All of these KPIs and metrics are going to feed into that financial model and the validation. But we understand that certainly the costing is going to be a big factor. What are the costs to build a swap charging station? What's the impact on maintenance, operating expenditure? And if we can really leverage feedback from the different players here in this space, not only can we start to develop a rigorous baseline, but we can also help one another fill in the gaps where we may not have our own data. For the folks on the call, it's really exciting to see, 60 plus people here listening in, and I would really encourage you, if you have experience or you plan to have experience in the space of trialing any electric vehicle, certainly would welcome your involvement in this, and really, if we can share with one another, we can leverage that investment and make decisions as best as we can. Next slide, please. All right, so similar to the conversations we had a few moments ago, we did do a survey, and that was relatively well received, and we've had 2 workshops so far since the spring of 2020. Mike, has been a huge help in terms of assembling KPIs and what that might look like, and also helping refine that down to a more tangible amount, something that's a little bit more bite-sized to try and work towards. We can't track every KPI, but if we can get the KPIs and the metrics that we think are critically important as a core group, and then work on standards of collection and develop standard means of going about validating these metrics, then we'll all be in the right place. So like I mentioned, we want to make sure those KPIs are clear, that they're measurable, and be consistent. Like Mike likes to say, what gets measured gets done. So that's what we're trying to do here. And as I mentioned, we'd love for your feedback and your participation, or even your perspectives on what KPIs are important to you in this space. And I think that's it for this project.
Very good. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Alex?
There are a couple of comments in the chat.
Oh, can you hear me? Eric from Mining 3.
Yes.
Why don't we go with you first, Eric?
Great, sorry. Just taking the opportunity. Thanks for this. We actually have been doing quite a lot of work around modelling, value of battery electric haulage, and one of the sort of the sensitivity or sensitive parameters is actually the battery life on the overall value to an operation, and manufacturers do quote a number of certain recharges for batteries on a depth of discharge basis, typically 80%, and but we found that we can develop and design operations that don't stress the batteries so much that you don't have to have this such a depth of discharge to operate the batteries between in a narrow range. But it's very hard to get that kind of information as a KPI for battery life. I don't know if anyone's got more experience on understanding of how best to manage or measure life of a battery.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And I think that's where the feedback from everyone really will be key. A lot of these metrics and the information that people want collected to help them in their business, it may be hard to translate that into KPIs, and so there's very likely going to be an area here that is a little more difficult to quantify, but it's still information we want to collect nonetheless. Just like you said, just like battery life, how many charge cycles are we seeing, before its usable capacity is depleted, for example. That's often a very anecdotal, response, and it's also a longer term metric. But if we can put as much focus and rigor around that as we can at least achieve, a relatively agreed upon benchmark and go from there.
Yeah, it sounds like we might need to also talk to some of the testing centres, like Hydro Canada. I'm trying to remember. Hydro Quebec. I believe they do a lot of battery testing, and many more labs around the world. That maybe there's more information we can get around this. It's just one of those sort of key costs. If you're charging regularly and have very heavy duty cycles on batteries, what's reasonable to the replacement strategy? But thanks for that. It's some good piece of work here.
Oh, thank you.
This is Brian, also from Artisan. I wanted to mention too that it was discussed that would be part of discussion of end of life condition for a battery was going to be part of the guideline as well. So there should be a little bit more work in that area to further the knowledge there.
Here's a question. This is Rami. With regard to the batteries, like the rate of charge and discharge are useful, or optimal utilization parameter of each batteries are chemistry specific, are they not? So what is the most common chemistry used right now, and what we're going to be publishing is going to be related to the existing chemistry, which were selected based on assumption XYZ. If you use a supercapacitor, for example, you're going to see the parameters, charge and discharge, are way different than your standard lithium iron phosphate or some other technology.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. And I think that's where the platform that we all have, the opportunity to participate in here is key, because part A of what we're trying to do with this operational knowledge sharing is align on common metrics and data, but the equally, if not bigger, piece to that part B would be the means of collecting and the standards of reporting, and that would involve certainly tracking what battery chemistry is in question for each metric, what vehicle it's operating in, what are the operating conditions, for example. We need to be very clear on how those data points are collected so that they're compared across a fair platform.
Very good. There were some comments.
If this is a trial, we need to quantify utilization as there could be limitations. That was a comment from Andrew Wibley. And then Mark Baker. Maintenance costs. Include cost of maintenance personnel, new skill sets for battery electric vehicles. Jenny said, this sounds very good, Alex. And Adrianus Hallam said, sharing information is not straightforward because each project is usually confidential.
Okay.
Those were the comments.
Thanks, Maria.